The lock wouldn't turn. I twisted the key again, then harder. Still nothing. My hands trembled slightly as I switched keys on the ring, trying every single one. Front door, back door, even the old garden shed key, though I knew it was useless. None of them fit. I stepped back from the porch, staring at the door of the house I had lived in for 38 years. Something cold began crawling across my spine. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. I reached for my phone, an old iPhone my son had insisted I use, in case of emergencies. I tapped his name. It rang 3 times. Then Jason picked up. "Hey, Mom," he said, casual. I kept my voice level. "I'm standing on my porch. None of my keys work. Did something happen to the locks?" There was a pause. Too long. I could hear the silence on his end like it was echoing through my chest. Then he spoke carefully. "We changed the locks. Amanda and I thought it's for the best. You don't live there anymore." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said, "That's very bold of you," and ended the call. I stood on Magnolia Lane for what felt like an eternity, leaning on my cane, the afternoon heat of Savannah settling like dust on my shoulders. No neighbors were around. Thank God. I'd just come from a funeral. Darcy, my neighbor of 20 years. We weren't best friends, but we chatted at the market, picked up each other's prescriptions from the pharmacy. At 73, every funeral starts to feel like a personal warning. But this was worse than death. This was being erased. Jason had mentioned it before, casually at first. "Mom, this house is too much. What if you fall on the stairs again?" Or, "Amanda and I found this lovely place, Sunny Slope Care Residence. View of the park. On-site medical staff." I always gave the same answer. "I've got 5 steps on my porch. I can still climb them." But they kept pushing. Amanda especially. She dropped by unannounced, check if I'd taken my pills, if the stove was off. I used to laugh it off, but lately I could feel her watching my china cabinet like it was already hers. Even my grandkids had started asking questions I didn't like. "Grandma, what happens to this house when you're gone?" Not if, but when. Ethan looked at the hardwood floors like a real estate agent. Sophie ran her fingers over my silver tea set like she was already writing it into her registry. I wasn't stupid. I'd seen it coming. I just never thought it would come like this. I called a cab. As it pulled up, I looked once more at my house, my garden, my porch swing, the lily bed Leon and I planted before he died. Everything looked the same, but I knew I wasn't welcome anymore. I had one number saved under "if everything goes to hell." Claire Donovan. She used to be my student back when I was Helen Whitmore, algebra teacher at Cypress High. She was a terror in math class, but smart, painfully smart. And now she was an attorney. I hit dial. She answered on the first ring. "Ms. Whitmore," she said. Wow, I haven't heard that name in forever. I swallowed. "Claire, I think I need legal help. Urgently." 20 minutes later, I was stepping into a sleek glass building downtown. Marble floors, cold air conditioning, elevator to the 8th floor. Donovan and Pierce, attorneys at law. Claire's name was on the door. Her office was calm, minimal, 2 landscape paintings, and a wall of legal books. She stood as I walked in. Same sharp eyes, same quiet fire. She pulled me into a hug. "Sit. Tell me everything." I opened the folder I'd been compiling for months, the one I hoped I'd never need. Property deeds, bank statements, my living will, a printed copy of my power of attorney document, signed and notarized, and at the very bottom, a flash drive. 3 years' worth of recorded conversations with Jason and Amanda. Not because I was planning revenge, but because something in my gut told me I might need the truth on tape. Claire read everything without interrupting. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Helen, what your son did isn't just cruel. It's illegal. He locked you out of your own property and tried to coerce you into surrendering your autonomy." I exhaled shakily. I don't want to ruin his life. Claire nodded. Then we'll find a way that protects yours. I looked out the window. The city moved below us, people rushing to meetings, buying coffee, making plans. I felt invisible, but I also felt ready. I'd spent my whole life teaching others how to solve problems, how to find patterns, how to think. Maybe it was time to solve one of my own. We're going to send him a letter, Claire said. But not just any letter. A legal one. Precise. And unmistakably serious. I nodded. Send it to his office. And his house. Let Amanda read it, too. Claire smiled and rolled her chair toward the keyboard. The letter was brutal in its elegance. Claire had a gift for writing things that felt like velvet on the surface, but cut like glass underneath. Every sentence was surgically precise. It outlined the facts: the unauthorized lock change, the attempted forced relocation, the misuse of financial authority. And it didn't stop there. Claire added a section on emotional distress and loss of access to critical medications, just to make it sting. Then, at the very bottom, she included a demand for immediate restoration of property access and a formal apology. She didn't just send it to Jason's house. She had a courier deliver a signed copy to his workplace, directly to the front desk at the wealth management firm where he served as a senior advisor. Let them see how their golden boy treated his mother. After everything was signed and sealed, Claire turned to me and said, "Now, where will you stay?" I shrugged. "I'll book a motel or an Airbnb. I don't want to be a burden." She scoffed. "You're staying with me. I have a guest room. End of discussion." Before I could argue, she added, "You once told me a plumber's daughter could become a lawyer if she worked hard enough, and that stuck. So now let me do this for you." That evening, I followed her to her apartment in Midtown. The space was warm and flooded with late afternoon light. A vase of daisies sat on the windowsill. Her guest room was cozy, made bed, fresh towels, a soft blanket folded at the foot like an invitation. On the nightstand, I placed the only item I'd brought from home: a silver-framed photo of Leon and me on the day we bought the house. We were younger then, laughing, windswept, holding keys like they were tickets to a whole new life. I stared at that photo for a long time before sleep came. The next morning, we went to the bank. I asked for a full statement of all my accounts from the last 5 years. The manager, polite and expressionless, printed out pages and pages of transactions. I could see the pattern now in black and white, small withdrawals spaced just far enough apart not to draw attention. Jason must have thought he was clever, but I was a math teacher. Patterns were my business, and I had let it continue, month after month, waiting for him to come clean, but he never did. I removed him as a financial proxy. Then we went to another bank, the one where I kept my safe deposit box. Inside were my originals: property deeds, insurance forms, birth certificates, and a voice recorder. Not digital, just a basic handheld device I'd bought from a Radio Shack years ago. 3 years of conversations, recorded discreetly. Jason telling me I was forgetful. Amanda saying the house was too much for me. Sophie asking if she could have my jewelry when the time came. All of it, preserved. Back at Claire's office, she spread the papers across her desk like puzzle pieces. "We're not going to court unless we have to," she said, "but we're building a case that could flatten him if he pushes back." I didn't answer right away. I was staring at the photo on her desk, Claire at her law school graduation, beaming, arms wrapped around 2 proud-looking parents. I wondered what it must feel like to grow up supported, believed in. I took a breath. I'm not doing this to destroy Jason. I just want him to stop treating me like I'm disposable. Claire met my eyes. Then let's make him see exactly who he's messing with. We finalized the letter. It was calm in tone, but merciless in detail. Claire included financial evidence, transcripts, even audio snippets. She made it clear: if Jason refused to reinstate my property access and financial independence, we would pursue legal action, and we had every right to do so. Before sending it, Claire leaned back in her chair and asked, Do you want to add anything personal? One sentence, maybe. I thought for a moment, then nodded. I asked her to include this. This isn't about a disagreement. This is about betrayal, and I will not be erased. The letter went out that afternoon. Claire handed it to the courier herself. I watched as he walked down the corridor, envelope tucked under his arm, heading out into the city to deliver something Jason would never forget. That night, Claire poured us each a glass of wine. We sat on her tiny balcony, the summer breeze curling around our ankles, and toasted in silence. After a while, she raised her glass again. To justice. I touched mine to hers. To survival. The next morning, I stayed behind as Claire left for court. Her apartment was quiet, sun-drenched, filled with the distant hum of traffic and birdsong. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching life unfold in the park below. Kids chasing pigeons, joggers passing mothers with strollers, couples holding hands. Everything moved forward, while I sat still, waiting for a man I raised to remember who raised him. But strangely, I didn't feel powerless. I felt clear, like something in me had finally clicked back into place. That old steel I thought I'd lost somewhere in my 60s, it was still there, just buried beneath years of compromise. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. And Jason, he was about to learn that the locks on a door don't make you the owner of what's behind it. The text came at 8:42 a.m., 2 days after the letter was delivered. It was from Jason. Just 3 words. Can we talk? I didn't reply. At 11:19, another one came. Not over the phone. Please, in person. This time I showed Claire. She studied the screen for a moment, then nodded. Let him speak, but on your terms. I chose the place carefully. The Magnolia table. A small cafe tucked behind the library, all dark wood and hanging lights. It used to be our Sunday spot, me, Leon, and Jason, back when he still asked me to cut his pancakes. I hadn't been there in years. Now it would be the arena. Claire insisted on coming with me. You'll lead the conversation, she said, but I want him to know you're not alone anymore. I wore a navy blue blouse, simple pearls, and brought my new cane, the one with the silver handle that made me feel like I could plant it in the ground and summon a storm. Claire wore her cream suit, the one that made her look like she could cross-examine God himself. We arrived 5 minutes early. Jason was already seated at the back table, staring into a coffee he hadn't touched. He looked terrible, shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes, a beard starting to take shape on his usually clean-shaven face. He stood up as we approached. Mom, he started, arms open. I stepped back. Let's not do theater. Sit down. He blinked, lowered his arms, and sank into the chair. I pulled out a small voice recorder and placed it on the table. This conversation will be recorded. If you object, we're done. He flinched. Seriously. I'm done letting people twist my words, I said calmly. So yes, seriously. Claire didn't say a word. She simply sat beside me, hands folded neatly in her lap. Jason's eyes bounced between us. Mom, I didn't mean for things to get this bad. You changed the locks on my home while I was at a funeral, I said, voice steady. You emptied my drawers. You sorted my life into donation boxes. I was going to explain, he mumbled. Explain the $80,000 you siphoned out of my accounts over 5 years. I slid a bank statement across the table. Were you planning to explain that to? He went pale. How did you? I taught high school math for 35 years, Jason. I know how to find patterns. I know how to read numbers. I waited for you to ask for help, but you never did. You just stole. It wasn't theft, he said quickly. I meant to pay it back. But you didn't, I replied, and you never intended to. He looked down at the table, jaw clenched. Claire finally spoke. Helen has a full record of your transactions, recordings of your conversations, and the legal documentation to pursue charges if she chooses. He barely nodded. Why? I asked quietly. What was so bad that you decided to throw your mother out of her own house? I was in debt, he muttered. 200 grand. I made a bad investment. Crypto. It crashed. I panicked. I didn't want to borrow from clients, so I used what I could. You mean me, I said. You used me. He winced. I didn't know what else to do. Claire leaned forward. You do realize that using someone's power of attorney to move funds for personal debt is a felony? He nodded, barely audible. I understand. I reached into my bag and pulled out another folder. We've drawn up a recovery plan. Not to punish you, to give you an option. Claire slid the papers to him. Sell your car. Liquidate non-essential assets. Relinquish your equity share in your firm. The numbers were tight but fair. Enough to pay me back and avoid prosecution. Jason looked at the papers like they were written in Mandarin. You want me to sell everything I built for 15 years? No, I said softly. We want you to take responsibility for what you nearly destroyed. He closed his eyes, then exhaled, slow and hollow. I need time. You have 3 days, Claire said. And one more thing, I added. The keys. Now. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the familiar ring of keys, placing them gently on the table. I took them, but didn't put them away. I leaned closer. This house isn't your inheritance. It's mine. I paid the mortgage with tutoring sessions and late-night grading. I cooked dinners after 3-hour staff meetings. I kept the lights on when your dad died. You don't get to lock me out of something you never built. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't see it, not at first. Not fully. I placed a hand over his. Then don't apologize to me. Apologize to yourself. And fix it. He nodded, then stood and left without another word. The keys stayed on the table between me and Claire, like proof that something had been reclaimed. We sat in silence for a while after he was gone. She sipped her water. I cradled my tea, now lukewarm but oddly comforting. There was no triumph in me, just quiet, steady. Hull. He didn't yell, Claire said softly. He didn't lie. He didn't threaten. No, I agreed. He listened, for the first time in a very long time. 2 days later, Claire drove me back to Magnolia Lane. In her passenger seat, I clutched the new set of keys like they were fragile, like they might disappear if I let go too long. As we pulled up to my house, I saw it exactly as I'd left it, quiet, picturesque, with the roses still blooming in front of the porch Leon built himself. But it no longer felt like mine. Not yet. I stepped up to the door, took a breath, and slid the key into the new lock. It clicked. The door opened. The first thing I noticed wasn't relief. It was absence. Something felt off. The rug by the door had been nudged out of place. The bookshelf wasn't quite flush against the wall. In the living room, a few drawers were left slightly ajar, books stacked unevenly. A chair moved a few inches too far from its usual place. Jason had come back, I realized, probably searching for the flash drive, for the folder, for anything he thought could be destroyed. But he hadn't found it. I walked through the house slowly, adjusting pillows, realigning picture frames. In the bedroom, I opened my jewelry box. Leon's wedding band was still there. That made my throat tighten more than anything else, because for all his selfishness, Jason had left that untouched. Not everything in him was gone. For the next week, I moved like a ghost through my own home. I cleaned, really cleaned. I threw out old magazines, scrubbed the baseboards, vacuumed under furniture I hadn't touched in years. I lit a lavender candle in every room, not because it made things smell nice, but because it made me feel like I was reclaiming the air itself. Every touch, every movement said, I'm still here. And then, on the 8th day, someone knocked. I opened the door to find Ethan standing there, a sheepish smile on his face and a bunch of wildflowers clutched in both hands. Hey, Grandma, he said. Can I come in? I stepped aside without a word. We moved to the kitchen, and I put the flowers in water while the kettle hissed on the stove. He sat quietly at the table, fidgeting with a napkin. I could see the weight in his shoulders. He wasn't just here to visit. "How are you?" he asked once we Saturday. "I'm fine," I said simply. "And you?" He hesitated. "Not great. Things at home are tense. Sophie barely sleeps at our place anymore. Mom and Dad fight a lot. I think they're blaming each other for everything." He paused. I didn't rush him. "I miss when we were a family," he said finally. "When we used to come here every Sunday. You'd make your apple pie. Dad would tell those dumb jokes, and Mom, she used to laugh. It felt real back then." His words cut clean through me, because it was real, and it had been eroding for years. Slowly, quietly, until one day no one noticed it was gone. "I used to make that pie every week," I said softly. "Then every holiday. Then never." He looked up at me, eyes wide. "Can we start again? Just Sundays. Just dinner. Even if it's just me and Sophie at first." I looked at him, this tall young man who used to sit on my lap with sticky fingers and a stuffed raccoon. Now he was asking me to rebuild something his parents had dismantled. "Yes," I said. "Let's start this Sunday. Invite your sister. And your parents too. If they come, great. If not, it's still a beginning." He nodded. "I'll try. I'll really try." Sunday came and I rose early. I baked the same apple pie. Crispy crust, cinnamon sugar glaze, just like Jason used to love. I roasted a chicken with rosemary, made mashed potatoes, tossed a fresh salad. I laid the table like I used to. Linen napkins, the good silver, the dishes Leon and I bought on our 25th anniversary. At 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. Ethan arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine and his usual nervous energy. "Need help with chairs?" he asked, already stepping in. Then Sophie showed up, more serious than usual, holding a box of pastries. She hugged me tightly, no words needed. And just when I thought that would be it, the third knock came. Jason and Amanda stood on the porch, together but not close. She was holding her purse tightly. He looked like he hadn't slept. Neither of them said anything as I opened the door, but they stepped inside. We sat down to eat. At first, it was awkward. Everyone focused on their plates. Words came slowly. Small talk, weather, work. But then the pie came out warm and fragrant. Sophie asked for seconds. Ethan cracked a joke. Even Amanda smiled when I complimented her hair. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Afterward, Ethan and Sophie retreated to the living room to start a movie. Amanda helped with the dishes. Jason lingered in the kitchen, staring out the window. I walked over. "How are you holding up?" I asked. He shrugged. "I sold the car, paid off most of the debt, looking for work. It's hard, but I'm surviving." "You'll manage," I said. He let out a hollow laugh. "A financial advisor who couldn't manage his own finances. Who's going to hire me?" "There's a place," I said. "Remember Mr. Pritchard? The econ teacher I worked with at Cyprus? He runs a financial literacy program now. They're hiring." I called. His head snapped toward me. "You recommended me?" "You're still my son, Jason. You made a mess, but that doesn't mean you can't try again." For the first time in a long time, I saw it. Gratitude in his eyes. Not expectation. Not manipulation. Just human thanks. "Thanks, Mom," he whispered. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Just be honest. This time for real." 2 months passed since that first Sunday lunch. It wasn't always smooth. Some weeks, only Ethan and Sophie came. Other times, Amanda would show up without Jason, or Jason would arrive late, eyes tired, shoulders hunched like he was still carrying the weight of every wrong decision. But they kept coming, not because they had to, not out of guilt, because they wanted to try. That, more than anything, told me things were changing. Jason had taken the job at Mr. Pritchard's Financial Literacy Center. It wasn't glamorous, no bonuses, no suits, no company dinners. But it was honest work. He taught budgeting to young couples, saving strategies to college kids, how not to fall for scams to retirees. At first, he stumbled. He told me one night, "Mom, you wouldn't believe how hard it is to teach people not to do exactly what I did." But slowly he found his rhythm. One evening, after a workshop with a group of seniors, he told me, I shared my story. Not the details, but enough. They listened, Mom. Really listened. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Amanda didn't last. There was no screaming match, no door slamming, no custody battle. Just a quiet separation. She moved back in with her parents in North Carolina, sent me a thank you card for holding space even when I didn't deserve it. And that was the end of our chapter. We never talked about her again. That was Jason's business, not mine. But the kids changed too. Ethan began asking questions about our family history. He'd sit on the floor with photo albums spread around him like old maps, pointing at people and places from a time before he was born. "Who's this, Grandma?" he'd ask. "What was Savannah like in the 70s? What did Grandpa Leon do before he opened the repair shop?" Sometimes I'd answer with a story, sometimes just a smile. He was piecing together the truth on his own. And Sophie surprised us all. One afternoon, while washing dishes, she said, "Grandma, can I ask you something private?" I turned off the water and faced her. "Anything." "Did you ever feel like people just expected you to give everything and not ask for anything back?" I didn't speak for a moment. I just dried my hands, placed them gently on her shoulders, and said, "Yes, all the time, and I let it happen for far too long." She blinked. I talked to Claire Donovan. She said I could shadow her this summer. I smiled. "You want to study law?" "I want to be like her. Like you. Strong. Quiet. But not invisible." "You already are," I said. "You just haven't seen it yet." That Sunday, she brought home an application form. Evening classes. Legal studies. She filled it out on my kitchen table beside the same pie crust I was rolling out by hand. The house, once filled with silence and tension, now hummed softly again. Laughter during dinners. Arguments over which movie to watch. Ethan trying to fix the old VCR just for fun. Sophie reading case, law, to me over tea. Jason showing up with groceries or a new set of measuring cups because the old ones squeak. None of it dramatic. None of it flashy. Just presence. And then one evening, as I sat on the porch wrapped in a shawl, a warm mug in my hand, Jason stepped outside and joined me. We watched the dusk settle in, the last bit of light catching the red maple across the yard. "I've been thinking," he said. "That day I changed the locks. I thought I was doing something bold, taking control, but I wasn't. I was scared. I didn't want you to see how much I'd failed." I sipped my tea. "You were right about one thing," I said quietly. "You showed me who you really were." He winced. "But you're showing me who you can be now," I added, "and that matters more." He looked out over the yard. "I still don't know how to fix everything." "You don't have to fix everything," I told him. "Just stop pretending it's not broken." He nodded slowly. Then, after a long silence, he said something I didn't expect. "I'm glad you couldn't get the door open that day." I turned to look at him, unsure if I'd heard correctly. "Because if you had," he continued, "I would have kept believing you were weaker than me, that you'd let me decide what you needed. But you didn't. You fought back. You reminded me who you are." I stared at him, unsure whether to cry or laugh. So I did neither. I just said, "Then don't forget it again." "I won't," he promised. And in that moment, with nothing dramatic said and no music playing, I felt something shift. Not because he had fixed it, but because I had. Not all wounds need to be shouted over to be healed. Some just need truth, spoken plainly and finally heard. "I'm leaving," I said one evening over dinner. Ethan looked up from his plate. "Wait, what?" Sophie froze mid-bite. Jason turned his head slowly. "You're what?" "I'm going to Europe," I said simply. "For 3 months." The room went silent. "You're serious?" Jason finally asked. Absolutely, I said, standing to retrieve a worn envelope from the sideboard. Inside was a folder of bookings, confirmations, train tickets, hotel reservations. London, Paris, Rome, Athens. I've been setting a little aside every year since your dad passed. I never told anyone because, well, I wasn't sure I'd ever go. But now I'm sure. Jason stared at the paperwork. You saved for this. I did, said, and I didn't need anyone's permission. They all came with me to the airport. Jason, Ethan, Sophie. Even Amanda sent a text from North Carolina. Safe travels. Thank you for everything. On the plane, as we soared above the clouds, I looked out at the vastness of the sky and thought, this is what freedom feels like. Not youth, not money, but the ability to wake up one day and say, today I choose me. In London, I wandered through the British Museum for hours, standing before ancient artifacts like they were mirrors of my own endurance. In Paris, I sat by the Seine with a baguette and black coffee, watching tourists stumble over their maps. In Rome, I walked cobbled alleys and ate pasta under strings of lights. In Athens, I laid on the beach beneath olive trees and wrote in a notebook all the cities I still wanted to see. I called home every Sunday. Ethan told me how his borched attempt had turned into soup disaster. Sophie asked for feedback on her essay about women's rights and inheritance law. Jason asked where I was, what I'd seen, and once, quietly, if I was happy. I told him I was. 2 months in, I received a package at my hotel in Florence. Inside was a small black velvet box and a handwritten note from Ethan and Sophie. Just because you exist, the card read. Inside was a silver pendant in the shape of a door. On the back, it was engraved, "You're the one who keeps the door open, even when they lock you out." I clutched it in my hand for a long time and then placed it around my neck. I haven't taken it off since. When I returned, they met me at the airport with flowers, balloons, even a homemade sign that read, "Welcome back, Grandma." And when I walked into my house, I gasped. The bathroom had been remodeled. New tiles, new sink, lavender towels, a skylight. "We chipped in," Sophie said. "You always talked about wanting to replace the tile." I cried, not for the tiles, but for the fact that, after all this time, they had finally heard me. In my bedroom now, there's a globe on the nightstand and a fresh journal where I keep a list of everywhere I still plan to go. Japan, Portugal, maybe Iceland, just to see the northern lights once in my life. The word retired no longer feels like a sentence. It feels like an open road. The word grandmother doesn't mean I have to babysit or sit still. It means I pass on strength, not just cookies and bedtime stories. It means showing my family that reinvention has no age limit, that boundaries are not acts of rejection, but of respect. Sometimes neighbors ask me if I've lost weight, if I've dyed my hair, if I've found someone. I smile and say, I just came back to myself. Jason now lectures at the center full time. Sometimes he invites me to sit in on his seminars. One day, after a class on estate planning, he turned to the audience and said, "Everything I teach, I learned the hard way. From my mother. She didn't go to business school, but she taught me how to live and how not to give up." I cried that day, but I waited until I got home. One of the women in the audience came up to me afterward, her scarf wrapped tightly around her head, a look of quiet bravery in her eyes. "Is he your son?" she asked. "Thank you. Both of you. Today, you changed something in me." Every Sunday, we still gather around the table. The food is simple. The laughter is real. The conversations are honest. No more pretending. No more roles to perform. Just people showing up. One evening, Sophie brought me a legal document. She had been accepted into a master's program, family law. Claire agreed to be her mentor. I signed the papers with a flourish. "Be better than all of us," I whispered. Ethan recently told me he's thinking of buying a place of his own. He wants to do it right, slowly, thoughtfully. He comes to me for advice, not because I have the answers, but because I listen. Sometimes Jason joins me on the porch. He doesn't say much, just sits with me. Sometimes he says, "I'm sorry." And I say, "I know." And that's enough. And one day, while the sun was setting and the crickets had just begun their evening song, he turned to me and said, "You know, Mom, when I locked you out, I thought I was in control. But all I really did was shut myself in." I smiled. "Then I'm glad you left the key." This wasn't revenge. This wasn't punishment. This was reclamation. This was me saying, quietly, firmly, and without apology, "I am still here. And I decide who walks through my door.